Hi, everyone. Welcome to this wild ride of an episode of the Christen Commentary podcast. I'll have more guests coming your way in the next few weeks. I have some really good future conversations lined up. But in the meantime, I had a eureka moment this past week, and I wanted to share this story with you because after years and years of doing political and cultural commentary on social media and training myself to look at issues from multiple perspectives and engaging with people that I disagree with on some of the most charged and complex issues, it is not often that I get stumped the way that I did this past week. It's not often that I have difficulty forming an opinion on a current news event, and I have no issue expressing my opinions publicly, even when I get pushback. So what was it? What happened in this past week that just kind of broke my brain? What was it, you ask, that drained my powers of assessment? Stevie, cue the video.
And she knows just what it takes to make a pro blush. All the boys think she's a spy. She's got Betty Davis eyes.
For those of you who don't know, that was Jojo Siwa doing a cover of the song Betty Davis Eyes, poorly, in what can only be described as trad wife cosplay, because that's not what Betty Davis looked like. I'm confused. It was kind of the last straw in what has been an exceptionally exhausting news cycle about this pop star and her personal life that has turned into this contentious political and culture war battlefield, and it just keeps getting curiouser and curiouser. In some ways, it's a tale as old as time. Jojo Siwa started out as a child star on the Dance Moms TV show and became a popular persona in the entertainment industry as an adult, whose career has sometimes been controversial, and she inevitably rebrands herself first as a gay and provocative icon, and then it looks like she's going in the opposite direction. We saw this with Britney Spears and Miley Cyrus, who started out as child stars on the Disney Channel and grew up and rebranded themselves. And these rebrands or reinventions can be shocking because sometimes they're so far away from the original child-friendly image, and sometimes it's so over the top that it worries people because these stars still have very young fan bases. And then what happens is they become these symbols or stand-ins and surrogates for these larger culture war anxieties, and the tabloids and the tastemakers tell us we have to either hate and attack them or love and defend them to the death. We know how this news cycle plays out, and it's not pretty. And this time it's different because there are issues of LGBTQ identity at play. So of course, because of the current political and cultural moment that we're in right now, the public discourse has become more charged than usual. And it's become the perfect example of how the outrage industry works. So even if you've never heard of Jojo Siwa, you're going to want to hang on for this ride because there are lessons here for all of us. And don't worry, I'm going to go through the whole saga, and I am here to provide the full gay tea. Tea means gossip. But I do have a literal tea mug with me for this one. And I've branded it as gay tea because I'm gay, and this story is all about gay branding. And I have a feeling that gay tea will be a recurring theme on this podcast. So I couldn't find a mug that says this on the internet. So I have designed my own, and you can see it's like I literally taped that on. It's a little improvised at the moment, but I could not wait to sit with you and share the gay tea, the timeline of events that led to this media and social media frenzy that made my brain short circuit. So, if you're expecting this episode to be my version of Chris Crocker,
leave Brittany alone! Please!
it's time to adjust your expectations because, like I said, this time is different. Not only because Jojo Siwa has become a victim of the modern outrage industry, but because it seems like she is most likely unintentionally, but still concerningly, contributing to it in a way that she hasn't previously. And that's the part of the story that made it difficult to digest because something about this whole thing with her has just not been sitting right with me. And with a little help from a very wise person in my life, I was able to figure it all out. Eureka. So join me, because if I can unpack this messy pop culture news cycle, I promise you that you can use the same method with any other messy story in the news. And God knows we are constantly inundated with messy news stories and controversies. It is time to reclaim our brains. Welcome to Christen Commentary.
Oh, America, land of the brave. But who will save the ones who crave freedom in a land so divided, where dreams and reality collided?
My friends, our country is in pain because our comments sections are inflamed. If you have followed me at all in the last 3 years, you have heard me talk about this outrage industry, which I would define simply as people or organizations who generate and cultivate outrage for the deliberate purpose of generating and cultivating profit. That means that not everything has to be a mass controversy in life, but there are people out there who will escalate the conversation instead of elevate the conversation and purposefully employ tactics of sensationalism because it's a proven way to get more clicks, likes, comments, shares, which boosts engagement and maximizes profit. It can also be used to push a narrative or agenda. These are not new tactics, but social media algorithms and comment sections have made these tactics more profitable than at any other time in human history because of the algorithms, which are designed by humans and run by AI and are literally designed to prioritize sensationalism because it boosts engagement, which keeps humans logged onto these apps longer. So we've moved beyond the tabloids into something that is much more insidious and much more sophisticated. So before I dive into this Jojo Siwa story, I want to remind everyone that your perception of the world is determined largely by what you consume, and what you consume is largely determined by robots. I wrote a whole Substack titled, "We Have to Become Our Own Information Analysts Now," on how to build good habits to critically engage with what we see online. So why, with all of these tactics, did I still struggle so much with this recent Jojo Siwa news cycle? Now is the time for the gay tea. Here's the timeline. Jojo Siwa was one of these young girls who was on the TV show Dance Moms, which I watched pretty much religiously. She appeared in, I think it was season 5, and was known as Jojo with the Bobo because she wore these big bows in her hair, and that was kind of like her brand. And it was very clear immediately that she was a phenomenally talented dancer with a lot of star potential. And it was also immediately clear that JoJo's mom, Jessie Lynn Siwa, knew that about her and didn't even try to hide the fact that she would do everything it takes to make her little girl famous, whether it was ethical or not. This is not a person who has ever really had the freedom to define herself outside of the spotlight. And this is an aspect of her that makes people feel pity and compassion for her, as they should, but it also elicits a certain amount of suspicion from her critics, who are always wondering if she really is who she says she is, especially because her public persona is always just so positive and happy. And people can't comprehend that a person could just be that positive all the time, so they assume she's being fake. Now, I think her positivity is part of why people like her a lot. Personally, I find her positivity to be very endearing. She also has these moments of total cringe, which people also view as evidence of her authenticity, and critics view as a total lack of self awareness or intelligence. And this bleeds into how they talk about her fans as well. And this goes back generations. I'm going to be PhD cultural historian Christen for a hot second, and I want to share this quote that I encountered about a decade ago by scholar Stacy Wolf, because it's spot on to describe what's happening here. She says, "The media's representation of girls as poor judges of culture, especially popular music, goes back at least to the mid 20th century." She recounts how this happened with young girls who were fans of Elvis, who were fans of the Beatles, and yes, even the Backstreet Boys. Fans were portrayed as simple and weak because their expressions of what we might call fangirl behavior, jumping and screaming and dancing, don't conform to how nice young girls are supposed to compose themselves in the public sphere. So she says that fangirls are often imagined as easily fooled, unreliable, and possessing bad and fickle taste. In today's terms, the haters think Jojo Siwa is fake and her over 50 million fans on social media are idiots. This, of course, is just an unfair assessment. It's unfair to them, as it ever was for any of us who ever called ourselves a fangirl, including my 89-year-old aunt, who still gets giddy when she talks about Elvis. You can only imagine how this conversation about young women and their fans changed when Jojo Siwa came out of the closet as LGBTQ in 2021. First of all, the immediate response was overwhelmingly positive, not just from the fans, but from the industry, from the media, and mostly everyone who was paying attention. She was also the first person to do same-sex partnering on Dancing with the Stars. And this got a lot of positive attention. And of course, there was some skepticism from gossip subcultures on TikTok and Reddit who wondered if this was real. There was this concern among some conservative parents about the influence that JoJo's coming out would have on children, because this was also happening at the height of the Don't Say Gay drama. And conservative commentator Candace Owens, who can always be relied upon to have the most extreme hot take, argued on her podcast, "I don't believe that Jojo Siwa is a real lesbian. I do believe she's desperate for attention." But Owens was really the only high-profile commentator on any side of the political spectrum to make that bold claim. It's important to note that there's this faction on the far right who believes that all LGBTQ identities and attractions are socially engineered and not authentic. And if you remember all of the negative stereotypes about young fans that I mentioned before, that they're easily fooled and unreliable, you can see how Jojo Siwa became this kind of punching bag in the comments section where she was portrayed as both a victim of lesbian indoctrination and a lesbian indoctrinator. This was not a national media conversation as much as it was a lot of her fans having to defend JoJo's coming out to their conservative parents. And interestingly enough, JoJo never identified as a lesbian at first. When she first came out, there were fans in the comments section asking her what her label is, i.e., which letter of LGBTQ does she identify as? And she basically said she didn't want to put a label on it and that she was still figuring it out. And eventually she used the word pansexual, meaning she's attracted to people regardless of their gender. In fall 2023, she used the word lesbian to identify herself in a YouTube video with content creator Joey Graceffa called Jojo Siwa Plays Which Woman is Secretly Lesbian, where a bunch of women came on and they all said they were straight, and she had to figure out, she had to like spot which one was secretly a lesbian. She also used the term in 2024 in the Hulu documentary Child Star, where she talks about when she, quote, came out as a lesbian, end quote. Her music video for her song Karma was very gay and very epic, and she said she wanted to make a big music video like Britney or Gaga did, and she funded it herself. She financed this video because she said nobody else wanted to make it. And this was slightly before Chapel Roan broke into the mainstream. So at the time, JoJo was one of the most high-profile lesbians in human history. We have other major pop stars who are LGBTQ, but who don't necessarily identify specifically as exclusively lesbian. And we've had major mainstream lesbian stars like Katie Lang, Melissa Etheridge, Haley Kiyoko, Tegan and Sarah, and Leslie Gore, but none of them had the kind of Nickelodeon-backed empire that JoJo did with her massive social media presence and merchandise. Jojo Siwa was like a next level lesbian until April 22nd, 2025. And this is where the chaotic news cycle begins. During an episode of Celebrity Big Brother UK, she's having a conversation with Danny Beard, an alum of RuPaul's Drag Race UK, and she says, I've always told myself I'm a lesbian, and I think being here I've realized, oh, I'm not a lesbian, I'm queer. Queer, for those of you who don't know, is a term that used to be an insult that has been reclaimed by the community as a kind of umbrella term for anyone who doesn't identify as straight. Okay, no big deal. She is still a member of the community, and this should not piss anyone off. And at first, it wasn't the fact that she changed her label that made people mad. The first thing that raised eyebrows was that she followed this declaration by saying, and I'm going to actually say, I'm going to bleep this out. I'm going to say this, I'm going to bleep it out. She said, the L, I'm going with the Q. Meaning that out of the LGBTQ letters, she's no longer identifying as L and is now identifying as Q. But lesbians were not pleased about how she said F the L, because it's one thing to change how you define yourself, and it's another thing to give the verbal middle finger to the rest of us in the same breath. After she was welcomed with open arms, hailed as a lesbian icon, and had a whole lot of folks in the lesbian community standing up for her online and off against conservative attacks, saying F the L, yeah, that stings a little bit. That stings. There's also a reason that the L is listed first in LGBTQ. The G for gay used to be first, but during the AIDS crisis, lesbians really stepped up and took care of people who were dying and played a major role in the activism that ended up saving lives. So we were given the honor of the first letter in the acronym. So saying F the L is really disrespectful on a couple levels that I honestly don't think she was thinking about when she said it. In the moment, it seemed like it was a little bit more like she was having fun. That's how it was intended, but it made people mad. And this is not the first time she's pissed off folks in the LGBTQ community.
Jojo! Have you learned nothing?
Last year, in 2024, she said she wanted to create a new genre called gay pop, which of course already exists, and it had existed for decades and was pretty mainstream at this point. She later clarified that she didn't think she invented it, but wanted to make it more recognizable. So far, this comment about gay pop and F the L, these both can be read in good faith as just rude and ignorant comments made by a very young adult who, at her pay grade and visibility, should probably just, like, I don't know, watch a documentary or two about LGBTQ history and just be more responsible. And that should be the end of the conversation. There's no mass controversy here until, while she's on Celebrity Apprentice Big Brother, she gets awfully chummy with celebrity Chris Hughes. At the time, she was dating non-binary influencer Kath Ebbs and has been accused of emotionally cheating with Chris, even though their physical closeness only went as far as cuddling, and they were getting very emotionally close, and it's clear that there was a relationship developing there. Ebbs confirmed that JoJo dumped them at the wrap party after the show was done filming. And JoJo confirmed on June 2nd that she and Chris Hughes are officially in a romantic relationship. Again, this on its own should never be controversial. JoJo identifies as queer, which basically means non-straight, and is in a relationship with a man. Cool. Except she said in an interview in the Daily Mail that she felt pressured into identifying as a lesbian, and that this pressure came from within the LGBTQ community. Do you see? Do you see? Do you see how that statement, that she was pressured into identifying as a lesbian, combines all of the things that have gotten us to this point into one big nuclear snowball of a controversy? Do you see how culture war outrage industry grifters see dollar signs and money bags when they see a statement like that? Do you see why my brain got broken by this news story that some of you may not have even realized was a thing? Everything, all at once, going all the way back to people having questions about her authenticity, being suspicious of if she is who she says she is, all of the criticisms of young women and their fans being fickle and unreliable and easily controllable, to the more sinister and insidious accusations coming from the extreme far right that make believe that all LGBTQ identities are socially engineered and that there's this like gay mafia out there who is influencing people to be gay. All of her critics are out there right now having a field day, and a lot of her fans who defended her all these years feel hurt and betrayed. And then there's another group who's mad at people getting mad that she's dating a man, because bisexuality exists and pansexuality and queerness exists, and you can date a man and still be part of the community. And this is like the biggest gift wrapped present that the far right could have ever asked for. In their minds, and for their followers, this confirms everything they've ever said. And in a less extreme vein, there has always been this idea that lesbians are just going through a phase and can be changed by the right man. And now people who believe this are trying to leverage this story and JoJo's comments about feeling pressured as proof. Breitbart, Ben Shapiro, and countless conservative accounts on X and other platforms are running with this. And what's crazy is that while these two more conservative ideas aren't part of the conversation on the left, there is a lot of the same talking points on the left wing of the outrage industry as on the right, particularly accusing JoJo of being fake and profiting from being a lesbian. And this prompts concerns about bi erasure and biphobia all around. And there's a lot of anger at her for reinforcing these harmful stereotypes I mentioned. An article in Medium called her a Republican tool. And there's a lot of people on both sides predicting that Jojo Siwa is going to become a MAGA Republican in the near future. And her embrace of this tradwife iconography in this latest music video with Betty Davis eyes seems to reinforce this theory. The right is calling her a conservative icon right now, and she has not identified as conservative at all. Talk about pressure to identify as something. But do you see the mess? Do you see my broken brain on the floor? The outrage industry is a billion-dollar industry, and they are making bank off of this story. And it's not just the media, it's social media, it's celebrities, it's influencers, it's Reddit threads, it's memes, it's op-eds, and even some of JoJo's comments themselves. And the likes and the clicks and the views and the press and the amount of articles speculating on whether or not she's pregnant by Chris Hughes because he had his hand on her stomach in a picture. And that cover is my last straw. So I was talking to my video editor, Stevie Reynolds, about all of this. And shout out to Stevie, because there are a lot of creative conversations that take place behind the scenes on this podcast. And I was like, I really want to do an episode on this whole Jojo Siwa thing, because it feels like I can't find a single sane hot take anywhere about this. What a mess. And what Stevie said next blew my mind when they were like, a sane person wouldn't be mad that she's dating a man, but we can be mad that she's throwing the LGBTQ community under the bus in the same breath. And that was it. It's so simple. This is the eureka I'm talking about. That whenever we see a controversy that seems so messy and multi-layered, that we need to remember that there are things that it is reasonable to be mad about, and then there are things that it's totally inappropriate to be mad about. And once you're able to separate these two categories, you can look at any issue on the planet and generate a sane, hot take. I am calling this the Stevie test, and I'm using this from now on with Christen commentary. Thank you to Stevie for helping me put my brain back into my head, because we all struggle with this sometimes. There are things about this whole Jojo Siwa story that a reasonable person does and does not have the right to be mad about, and applying the Stevie test is to apply this line of questioning. What does a reasonable person have the right to be mad about in this situation? And what doesn't a reasonable person have the right to be mad about in this situation? And you'll see how you can untangle the trickiest webs. A reasonable person can be mad at how JoJo's mom treated her as a child. and cultivated her stardom. But a reasonable person can't be mad at JoJo's success or claim that she didn't work hard for it, because she definitely did. A reasonable person can question the relationship between a celebrity's public and private personas, but a reasonable person cannot assume that it's 100% authentic or 100% fake, because you will never have access to the answer to that question. A reasonable person can have concerns about what young fans consume and how it shapes their behavior. But a reasonable person must also recognize that there's no one-to-one correlation between what a person sees and how they act. If that were true, 99.9% of advertising would be effective. Entertainment is not mind control, and fans are smarter and more critical than people have historically given them credit for. A reasonable person cannot be mad about who a person dates as long as all parties are legally consenting. A reasonable person cannot be mad if someone redefines how they define themselves, because self-definition is a fundamental right. A reasonable person can be mad if a person craps on other people's identities and accuses them of being fake or socially engineered. And a reasonable person can be mad if others are projecting identities onto others that they never claimed. Jojo Siwa is not a trad wife. And to all of the people on the left and the right who are trying to frame her as part of some big conservative backlash against wokeness, she never said she's a conservative. She hasn't rejected LGBTQ rights. In fact, she's out there right now on the podcast circuit reinforcing that love is love. She's not straight all of a sudden just because she's dating a man. She's queer. She's still in the LGBTQ community. She never talked about a gay mafia. Other people are putting those words in her mouth, and she never said she was going through a phase. And her boyfriend actually seems like a really cool ally, and they started getting closer because he supported her on Celebrity Big Brother when Mickey Rourke was making these disgusting and homophobic comments. Be mad at Mickey Rourke, not Chris Hughes. And you can be mad that she emotionally cheated on her partner before dumping them. Ill-advised, yes. And hopefully they can find an appropriate path to healing. And you know what? We'll just leave it at that, because the rest is none of our business. A reasonable person can be mad at her for saying F the L and then going on podcasts later trying to pretend like she never said it. Don't gaslight us, JoJo. She said it, it was on camera, and it was rude, and it was ignorant, especially after she leaned into being a lesbian icon. And while it didn't make or break her career, she did profit from it. So it's more than reasonable for lesbians to say F you back if they so choose, as long as they are following the other reasonable rules. And yes, a reasonable person can be mad at her cover of Betty Davis Eyes because it is simply bad art. It sounds like the lunch lady is singing it. And it's a good song. Listen to the Kim Carnes version from 1981 and you'll see what I'm talking about. And the last point, which is also the trickiest. Can a reasonable person be mad that her words about being pressured into identifying as lesbian are being leveraged by the extreme right to harm LGBTQ people and reinforce negative stereotypes and false stereotypes? Yes, a reasonable person can be mad that the right is deliberately using a queer person's words to attack the queer community in bad faith. But can a reasonable person be mad at her for saying it in the first place, especially if it's true, and giving them that ammunition? When Ellen DeGeneres came out of the closet in the late 90s, there was a Gallup poll 2 years later that said that 50% of America didn't even believe that same-sex relationships should be legal. And in a lot of states back then, it technically wasn't. Ellen lost everything when she came out, and that wasn't that long ago. The idea that someone can profit by publicly identifying as lesbian is such a new concept, and the idea that the community pressures people into adopting specific labels after they've already come out is also kind of a new thing, and it seems to be coming more from fans in the comments section rather than a backstage gay mafia. It's hard to pinpoint exactly what she's talking about when she says she feels pressured. And of course, if she's feeling pressures, that's not good because, like I said, self-definition is a fundamental right. And how much of this is branding and how much of this is her living her life? So here's my most sane hot take on this. The last thing I want her to do is to have to do some kind of apology video to the LGBTQ community for the things that she said. Those kinds of public apologies really rub me the wrong way, and many of the critics won't accept them as authentic anyway, especially if she does it, because there's already so many questions about her authenticity. What I'd like to see her do right now, instead of releasing a bad cover of Betty Davis Eyes, I want her to get out there and defend the LGBTQ community from these conservative attacks in the same way that we defended her. Eureka. And that's the gay tea with Christen commentary.
Dreams and dreams